Hello, welcome back to my drive home from work. This is the most convenient time that I have to film, so here we go. I have just entered 30 weeks of my pregnancy. This is my third pregnancy, my third baby. We are having a girl, so I have a boy, a girl, and then we're having another girl. So we're very excited, and I thought that in honor of entering into 30 weeks solidly into my third trimester of pregnancy, that I would share with you some natural family planning, fertility awareness, charting. What does that look like when you are postpartum? Okay. That is a very confusing time to try to chart your cycle. Not every woman gets her cycle back right after she has her baby. And so when you're charting your cycle, you're looking for that first sign of ovulation coming after, when you're postpartum, after you have your baby. And your body is doing things that it's not used to doing on a regular basis, right? So things can just get really confusing. So I hope on this drive home today that I'm able to clarify some things for you while you are, if you are on this journey of breastfeeding and trying to chart your cycle. And also too, if, you know, family planning, if you're planning for a pregnancy down the road, what breastfeeding or just even postpartum charting your cycle might look like. So let's get into it. For those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Haley. I work at an OBGYN clinic where I teach women and couples how to chart their cycles so that they can either achieve or avoid pregnancy, and also so that they can maintain and manage their fertility. And so in this job, there is a part of it where I teach a lot of women that are in the postpartum period. They've got little babies and they are wanting to avoid pregnancy. And so we're looking at what signs is their body giving them to determine where they're at in their cycle. Is their cycle even returning right now? Right? That's what we're looking for. So let's just kind of take a step back really quick and look at the hormones that are at play when you are postpartum. When you are postpartum and you are breastfeeding, there is a hormone that's producing the breast milk that's called prolactin. And prolactin is a hormone that actually naturally suppresses ovulation. And so when prolactin is high, it's very common for women who are breastfeeding, because they're producing a lot of prolactin, to not ovulate right away, right after they have the baby. That natural suppression of ovulation is occurring because of that hormone. So what we are looking for is, when does your cycle return after you have your baby? Well, I really wish I could give you an X amount of days or amount of weeks or amount of months that it returns, but it is different for every single woman. So if you are not breastfeeding at all, then most likely your cycle is going to return by about 6 weeks postpartum. So that means that ovulation and your period is going to start occurring, again, like I said, about 6 weeks postpartum if you are not breastfeeding at all. Now, if you are breastfeeding and that hormone prolactin is higher, that is going to cause that suppression of ovulation. So here's kind of the main rule of thumb. If a woman is totally breastfeeding when she is postpartum, meaning all of the baby's sustenance is coming from the mother's breast. So whether that means directly from the mother's breast with breastfeeding, or if the mom is pumping, either way, if all of baby's nutrients is coming from mom's milk, that is considered total breastfeeding. And this would mean that a woman is going to be completely infertile, will not ovulate until she is at least 8 weeks postpartum. So that is exactly, 56 days, right? 56 days, 8 weeks postpartum is when she can be pretty much guaranteed ovulation is not coming anytime soon. Now, after that 8-week point, again, if you are totally breastfeeding, baby has never had any supplementation from formula, never had anything else other than mom's milk, totally breastfeeding, 8 weeks postpartum, you should not, most women are not going to be ovulating until that point. Now, after that point, that's where it gets a little tricky. Some women, no matter how much they breastfeed, always get their cycle back at 3 months postpartum, and that's just how it is. That's how their body is made. I, however, However, just to give you an example, for both of my pregnancies before this, so maybe it'll be the same with this one, maybe it won't, but I have not gotten my cycle back until I have been completely done with breastfeeding. And what that's looked like for me is I breastfed my kiddos until they were about a year old. And that looked different, right? Like when they were 5-6 months, I started introducing solid foods and all of that. Like it wasn't like totally breastfeeding throughout that whole time. But until I was completely done, meaning I was not even having one nursing session at all, I did not have my cycle back. It was not until I was completely done nursing that I got my cycle back. So some women, that's how it is, but for other women, it's different. So again, I wish I could give you if you're breastfeeding this much, then you won't get your cycle back until this amount of days, but it just doesn't happen like that. Every woman's body is going to be a little bit different and more or less sensitive to that prolactin hormone. But now that would be in a totally breastfeeding scenario, going back to the whole, 8 weeks postpartum, you're not going to be ovulating. Now the other part or the other way to breastfeed would be breastfeeding weaning. So there's like totally breastfeeding, and then there's breastfeeding weaning. And so that means that the woman is still breastfeeding, baby is still getting some nutrients from mom's milk, but baby is also getting additional nutrients from maybe its formula, or maybe, you're at that point where you're starting to introduce solids into the baby's diet, right? That is when you are starting to wean your baby. That is just because of the fact that you're introducing a different kind of supplementation or a different kind of nutrients to baby than just mom's milk. So when you are breastfeeding weaning, that is really when you want to pay attention to those signs of that ovulation starting to return. And even if you're totally breastfeeding where baby's not getting any supplementation from anywhere else, if you're past that 8-week point of postpartum, you also want to begin to start looking for signs of ovulation. So what are signs of ovulation when you are breastfeeding? Well, what's important to know is that 1 out of every 3 women who breastfeed will have ovulation occur before their first period when they're postpartum. So what does that mean, right? That means that about 30% of women who are breastfeeding will not have their period first to kind of tell them like, hey, fertility is returning. I have my period. We're getting back into this. No, 30% of women, 1 out of 3 is going to ovulate before having your period. And so this is where you hear of women who are like, I got pregnant and I don't even know how because I didn't have my period yet postpartum. Well, it's because ovulation can sometimes happen before the period happens. So you don't have that warning sign of a period to tell you, hey, by the way, your fertility is returning. So when you are charting your cycle when you're postpartum, you want to start looking for signs of ovulation because 1 out of 3 women will ovulate before they have their periods. They don't have that kind of like caution, warning sign, hey, your fertility is coming back. So looking for those signs of ovulation. Well, cervical mucus, right? Cervical mucus is a telltale sign of something going on with estrogen and something going on possibly with ovulation. Now, what's really common for breastfeeding women is that you may have cervical mucus kind of just coming and going throughout breastfeeding, but it's not actually leading to ovulation. Some women have these mucus patches, what we call them, that they just, for a few days they see mucus and a few days they're dry. A few days they see mucus, a few days they're dry. That's what these mucus patches are. Other women will have continuous mucus. So just all throughout breastfeeding, they are constantly producing mucus all the time. So does that mean that she's just fertile all the time? No. So here is where the kicker comes in, right? We want to look for what mucus that this woman is producing is considered truly fertile, meaning it could actually be leading towards ovulation, and what mucus is more so just background noise, kind of the same old stuff that her body's producing every day or every few days, and it's not actually changing. There's nothing significant or special about it. It's just kind of what she's seeing, the same old stuff. So what we are looking for is a change in estrogen. When you have a change in estrogen, when your ovaries start that activity again and start producing estrogen, this is what creates a change in the mucus that you're seeing. So you may go from seeing just kind of, like I said, that same old stuff that you're always seeing. Maybe it's not super stretchy or not super clear. It's just kind of stuff that's there. And then maybe you get to a point where you notice a significant change. Maybe it's starting to stretch a lot more. Maybe there's just a lot more there. Maybe it's a lot more slippery. There's something different about the characteristic of the mucus that you're seeing now than you saw, earlier on postpartum. This is indication of your estrogen kind of like waking up, right? Before this change, this point of change, when you start to see a change from the same old stuff to, okay, like this could be leading to ovulation, we have a term for it that's called ovarian quiescence. So ovarian quiescence basically just means that the ovaries are staying quiet. So the ovaries are what produce estrogen. And when the ovaries are staying quiet, that's basically saying that your estrogen is at a baseline level. So it may be producing some mucus, but it's at a baseline. It is not going up or down. When you start to see that change in the way that your mucus, looks or behaves or is characterized, right? When you start to see that change, that's an indication that your ovaries are waking up, that your estrogen is starting to rise, and that your body is now trying to ovulate. So it's really important when you are breastfeeding and you are trying to chart that you are working with an instructor. If you are still new to the charting scene, you're working with an instructor to really figure out what is the difference between the same old stuff that I'm seeing all the time versus this actual change, this mucus that I'm seeing that may indicate, okay, my ovaries are waking up, estrogen is starting to rise, and ovulation could be happening soon. So that's what we are looking for. So when you have just all the kind of the same old stuff all the time, and it's just there, maybe it comes and goes, or it's just there all the time, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're just fertile all the time. In fact, it probably doesn't mean that you're just fertile all the time. Now, I can't just sit here in a video and you're a rando person watching me, and I can't just say, hey, you're infertile. I can't do that, okay? I would need to see your chart, or you need an instructor to be able to see your chart and really help you navigate that. But I'm just giving you an overall example of, okay, if you're seeing the same old stuff all the time, it is usually an indication of ovarian quiescence, or having quiet ovaries. Your estrogen is not actually rising. Once you start to see that change in the mucus, and that is going to be an indication of, okay, ovaries are waking up, estrogen is rising, you are possibly leading towards ovulation. So this is why charting when you are postpartum can be so helpful, because again, like I said, 1 out of 3 women will ovulate before they get their period. And so we're looking for, when is ovulation happening? We want to get to know that. That is our main, because that's the main event of the cycle. And then what's even greater about that is that when you are breastfeeding and you do pinpoint when ovulation happened, you know when your period is coming back too, because basically rule of thumb is that for most women, after you ovulate, you have about 2 weeks left until your next period. No matter how long your cycles are, in general terms, right? We're speaking for most women here. After ovulation, you will have about 2 weeks until your next period. So that is really good news too when you are charting postpartum and you're looking for when your period is going to start. Again, if you can pinpoint when ovulation occurred, you'll know exactly when you're going to get your next period. So I hope this video was super helpful in just talking about this postpartum period, charting while you are breastfeeding. And if you are in this season of postpartum, or maybe you are in a 3rd trimester like me and you're prepping and anticipating this season, I hope that you really just enjoy it, and that it is something that is just giving you life. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself, taking care of your baby and your family, your husband, or whoever's around you. And I will see you again